Hey Chaotic Crew, Brian here with another Duskmourn Precon review and upgrade. This time we're going over the Golgari Death Toll Precon. Make sure that if you want to win a free Duskmourn Precon of your choosing, leave a comment in this video as well as the other review and upgrades for the Duskmourn Precons we have on the channel. And if you comment on all the videos, 2 weeks after the last upgrade video goes out, we will be announcing a winner live on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/chaoticcommandermtg. But let's just dive into this video. We're going to be taking out 15 cards, putting in 15 new cards, and pretty much just going over the deck, what it wants to do, how it operates, and the whole game plan. So let's dive right in. The commander of this deck is Winter, Cynical Opportunist, 2 of anything, a black and a green for a 2/5 human warlock with Death Touch. Whenever Winter attacks, you mill 3 cards, and then at the beginning of your end step, you may exile any number of cards from your graveyard with 4 or more card types from among them. If you do, put a permanent card from among them onto the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So as long as you have those 4 card types, you can get any permanent from among them onto the battlefield, so definitely very helpful. Finality counter means that if it's put into the graveyard, you exile it instead. So just make sure to keep an eye out for that. What this deck really wants to do is to mill itself and to have a lot of different card types in the graveyard. So we want a bunch of artifact creatures, enchantment artifacts, planeswalkers. All of those will be very helpful in making sure that we can trigger our commander. Our commander can attack and get through. Death Touch helps with that, but we don't have to, right? If we can already mill ourselves out, as long as we have those cards in our graveyard, does not really matter. So we could build around that. We could build just filling our graveyard. I think this deck does a really good job of having different card types. The way they built this deck is it has actually a lot of insect synergy. I don't know how I feel about that, but lots of different insects in here. I think you could actually do a better job of putting in just better bombs, better cards you want to get out with your commander, but a solid deck overall. Let's go into the creatures. Starting off, we have Dryad Arbor, a land creature, so it enters the battlefield as your land for turn, and it's also a creature, so board wipes will not be great for this, but if you mill it, it's a land and a creature, so it counts as 2 of those card types. Gnarlwood Dryad, a 1-mana 1/1 Death Touch. As long as you have 4 or more card types in your graveyard, it gets +2/+2. Haywire Might is great artifact or enchantment removal, and it's an artifact creature to boot, so that's pretty helpful. Stitcher Supplier, 1-mana 1/1, enters the battlefield or dies, you mill 3 cards, so that's really good there. Deathcap Cultivator, solid ramp piece, and it also gains Death Touch if you have Delirium, which is having 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard. Grim Flare, 2/2 Trampler, when it deals combat damage, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put any number of them into your graveyard, and the rest back on top of your library in any order, and it gets +2/+2 as long as there are 4 or more. And it gets +2/+2 if you have that Delirium. Grimflayer is not bad. Early game is pretty solid, but late game can maybe struggle to get in, even if it is a 4/4. Obsessive Scanner is really neat. 2 mana. When it enters, you put a 1 counter on a target creature, and then if you have Delirium, at each opponent's upkeep, you put a 1/1 counter on target creature. So this is a good way to buff your commander, right, and help your commander make sure he gets through to mill those cards. Sakura Tribelder is just a great ramp piece in green. Scavenging Ooze is a great graveyard hate, right, on a creature, so that's nice there. Skola Grove Dancer gives you some life gain whenever a land is put into your graveyard from anywhere, and you can also pay 3 to mill 1, which is nice. Suspicious Bookcase makes creatures unblockable, so you can do this with your opponent's creatures, which is really nice, but typically you want to be doing it for your commander. Burnished Heart is a land route piece, artifact creature style. Next Weaver, enchantment creature. Beginning of your upkeep, you put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard, and then you can exile Next Weaver, return a card from your graveyard to your hand. So definitely very good utility with this card, and if it's in the graveyard, it's 2 creature types. Ursine Monstrosity is a 3/3 bear mutant with trample for 3. At the beginning of combat on your turn, mill a card and choose an opponent at random. Ursine Monstrosity attacks that player this combat if able. Until end of turn, Earthsign Monstrosity gains indestructible and gets +1/+1 for each card type among cards in your graveyard. So definitely solid here. You're going to be swinging in easily with 5/5, a 6/6 early on. Maybe later you're getting 7, 8, 9 if you have all the card types, right? So that could be good there. Carrion Grub, a 4-mana 0/5, gets +X/+0, where X is the greatest power among creature cards in your graveyard. And then when it enters, you mill 4 cards. So this is nice. If we had a good way to get more into the battlefield triggers, the Carrion Grub would be solid in here, but as it stands, not the best card. Psalms of Maracrum is great. It's a good ramp piece. You want it to die, and if it's in the graveyard, it counts as 2 creature types, so can't really complain there. Ishkanah is a decent 3/5 with reach. And has Delirium, so if you have those 4 card types, when it enters, you get 3 1/2 green spiders with reach. And then you can pay 7 to make someone lose life for each spider you control, so that's interesting there. Moldgraph Millipede, 5 mana for a 2/2, enters, mill 3 cards, and put a 1/1 counter on it for each creature card in your graveyard. So will typically be, you know, especially in Commander, maybe a 7/7 or an 8/8. If it's a 7/7 or an 8/8, you know, vanilla creature for 5 mana, maybe not the best for the deck, but a fun card for sure. Renma Creaking Nest, the alternate commander here, 5 mana for a 5/5 with menace and reach. And whenever it enters and whenever you play a card with 2 or more card types, each player creates a tapped 2/2 black bird creature token with flying. The tokens are goated for the rest of the game. So this is definitely going to be really good against your opponents. And the great part about this is you're also making the tokens, right? And even though they're goated, when we get down to the 1v1 stage of having only one opponent, then you have the creatures as well. So it's not as if you're only giving your opponents the buff. So solid there. Noxious Gearhulk, 6 mana, 5/4. When it enters, destroy a creature, gain life equal to its toughness. Definitely great there. Titania, Nature's Force, is a solid reprint for the deck. 6 mana, 6/6. You may play Forest from your graveyard. Whenever a Force enters the battlefield under your control, create a 5/3 green elemental creature token. And then whenever an elemental you control dies, you may mill 3 cards. So this kind of is a good card to get off of your commander, and then as you start to maybe play lands, or you know the elementals you make start to die, you can mill more cards. Not bad there. Demolisher Spawn is a 7 mana 7/7 with trample and haste. When it attacks, if there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard, other attacking creatures get +4/+4 until end of turn. So very good there, especially if we're going wide. Giant Ataphage, 7/7 trampler. When it deals combat damage, you make a copy of it. So very good there. Hornet Queen, 7 mana 7/7. When it enters, you make 4 1/1 green insects with flying and death touch. And then Moldgraph Monstrosity, 7 mana, 8/8 with trample. When it dies, exile it, then return 2 creature cards at random from your graveyard to the battlefield. So can help get some reanimation there, and is just a really strong creature as well. And then last but not least, Vile Mutilator, a new card. As a demon, additional cost to cast a spell, you sacrifice a creature or an enchantment. It has flying, trample, and when it enters, each opponent sacrifices a non-token enchantment, then sacrifices a non-token creature. So this is from the main set of Duskmourn, and very good. We're not going to be casting it most of the time in this deck. We're going to be getting it with our commander, and then the enter the battlefield trigger is just going to pop off and do lots of work there. The deck runs 4 Planeswalkers because you do want some Planeswalkers. Grist, probably one of the best to run in the deck because outside of the battlefield, it's also a 1/1 creature, so counts as 2 creature types in the graveyard for our commander. And it's just really solid there. It can make insect tokens. You can sacrifice a creature to destroy another creature or Planeswalker. And then you can... The big ultimate makes your opponents lose life equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard, so that can be, you know, pretty good there as well. Obnixilis Reignited is not bad for a Planeswalker, right? Draw a card and lose a life, destroy a creature, and get an emblem with whenever a player draws a card, you use life to target opponent, so it's all there. Red and 7 is really good too. We +1 to reveal the top 4, put a land, or all lands, excuse me, into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard, so a good way to start milling cards and keep those lands in hand. And then you can 0 to put lands on the battlefield from your hand tapped, and then -3 makes a token, and then -8 returns all permanents from your graveyard to your hand, and then you have no max hand size. So really good card there, especially for a self-mill deck. And then we have Professor Onyx. which has a static ability. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery, each opponent loses 2 life and we gain 2 life. Having those life gain pieces in the deck, it definitely helps us last a little bit longer, which is nice. +1, you lose 1 life. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 in your hand and the rest into your graveyard. So already doing what the deck wants to do. And then -3, each opponent sacks a creature with the greatest power among creatures that player controls. So really good removal there. And then each opponent may discard a card. If they don't, they lose 3 life. Repeat this process 6 more times. So a pretty strong card there. Going to spells, Reanimate just gets a creature from our graveyard to the battlefield. Grapple with the Past mills cards and returns a creature land from a graveyard to our hand. Grizzly Salvage does the same thing but reveals the top 5 instead. Inscription of Abundance is nice. It's going to give our commander some counters. It's going to gain us life as well, which is nice. And then target creature we control fights target creature you don't control. Having a Death Touch commander helps here too. So this can really just be a 2-mana instant speed removal spell if we need it to be, which is always nice. But getting all the abilities for 5 mana is solid too. Mulch is great. It's essentially milling 3 cards, put lands that were milled this way into our hands. Knight's Whisper is a little bit of a draw. Rampant Growth is great ramp. Arachnogenesis is sort of a great buffer, right, and makes us a bunch of tokens. Deluge of Doom is interesting. All creatures get -X until end of turn, where X is the number of card types among cards in your graveyard. So typically this could be, 6 or 7 at the most, maybe, 8 if we get there. And there will be some creatures that can avoid -7, -7, or -6. Still pretty solid for 3 mana, and we'll typically get rid of our commander as well, so just need to make sure we need to use this before we do it. Formless Genesis, 3 mana for a Kindred sorcery, that Kindred adding that 8th card type, right? You just cast it to create an XX cardless shapeshifter creature with Changeling and Death Touch, and X is the number of land cards in your graveyard. Also has Retrace, also has Changeling. This can go into a bunch of different decks, but is really nice here because we want those different card types. Harrow is really good too to get ramp and put a land into our graveyard. Putrefy is good removal for artifacts or creatures. Culling Ritual gets rid of each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less, and you get a bunch of mana, so that can help us cast some of our big mana spells if we have it in our hand, and can get rid of other people's mana rocks and whatnot. Harmonize draws us 3 cards. Convert to Slime destroys an artifact, a creature, and up to 1 target enchantment, which is pretty good there. And then if you have Delirium, you get an XX Ooze, where X is the total mana value of permanents you destroyed, so that's always good too. Then you have a bunch of artifact ramp, Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Golgari Signet, Mindstone, Talisman, Commander Sphere, Whisper Silk Cloak to keep your commander unblockable, which is nice. Now, for all these artifact ramp pieces, usually in green decks, I'm not a huge fan, but in this deck where we want as many, card types in the graveyard as possible, having these is not bad at all. Enchantments, we have Cemetery Tampering, which Hideaway 5, beginning of your upkeep, you may mill 3 cards, and if there are 20 or more cards in your graveyard, you may play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. Now, we are going to be exiling some with our commander, which isn't ideal, but we're eventually going to be able to get to that Hideaway trigger because we're going to be milling so many, and I think just getting 3 a turn is really solid there. Crawling Sensation, 3 mana enchantment as well. Beginning of your upkeep, you may mill 2 cards. And these cards are mays, not must, so helpful there too. Whenever 1 or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, for the first time each turn, you make a 1/1 green insect. So this deck does like to make a lot of tokens and can really do a good job of keeping blockers, right, for annoying creatures on our opponent's side. Into the Pit, 3 mana for an enchantment. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast spells from the top by sacrificing a non-land permanent in addition to paying their other costs. So this is really good, especially in token decks, right, to be able to use cards of the top card of your library. Or the only problem with this is if there's lands on the top, you can't really cast spells with this, but definitely really solid here. Binding of the Old Gods is great removal, then gets a forest, then gives our creatures Death Touch, which is nice. Deathreap Ritual is sort of delayed card draw. We're probably going to be drawing lots of cards off this as the game goes on if we can play it early enough, but it does not do anything immediately. That's probably the biggest downside with this one. Whip of Erebos is a really solid reprint here, and it's 2 card types as well. Gives creatures you control lifelink, and you can reanimate a creature and it is exiled at the end of the turn. A Deadbridge Chant is nice. You mill yourself for 10, and then you Beginning of your upkeep, choose a card at random in your graveyard. If it's a creature, return to the battlefield. Otherwise, you return it to your hand. So this could be really good, especially in the late game when we have lots of good cards in our graveyard. Demonic Covenant, 6 mana for a Kindred Enchantment Demon. Whenever one or more demons you control attack a player, you draw a card and you lose a life. Beginning of your end step, create a 5/5 black demon with flying, then mill 2 cards. If 2 cards that share all their card types were milled this way, sacrifice Demonic Covenant. So want to make sure we have as many cards with different card types so that this card stays on the battlefield, because if we're making a 5/5 demon at each of our end steps and we're drawing a ton of cards, then this is really good here. Then we have a new room card, Polluted Cistern on the left side for 1 and a black. Whenever one or more cards are put into your graveyard from your library, each opponent loses 1 life for each card type among those cards. And then the right side, Dim Oubliette for 4 and a black. Whenever you unlock this door, mill 3 cards, then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So just a reanimation spell there, but having a static ability to hurt your opponents every time you are milling is pretty solid as well. Then we have 37 lands in the deck. Nothing really crazy from this land cycle. We do run the artifact lands, Tree of Tales, Vault of Whispers, and Dark Moss Bridge, which really helps there. Other than that, nothing to write home about. But let's dive into some of the cards I would take out and some of the cards I would add in. First off, I'm taking out Obnixilis. I think he is a solid card, but doesn't do enough for us. Even if we're getting it off our commander, it doesn't have a static ability. It can draw us cards, it can destroy creatures, which is really nice, and it's a creature, or it's a different card type that we want, but we could just get better things in here. Taking out 12 creatures. Burnished Heart is just too slow for this deck. Sure, it technically wants to sacrifice itself, put itself in the graveyard, but 6 mana in a green deck to ramp is really not what you want to be doing. Carrion Grub we took out. Like we said, we don't really have a way to abuse the enter the battlefield trigger, right? Sure, we are, if we get this with our commander, we replace the 4 cards we exiled with the 4 cards we mill, so that could be nice there, but really not the best card here. Giant Adaphage is a great card, but not really the best for this deck. It doesn't do enough when it enters. If we're getting this off of our commander, we have to wait a whole turn cycle, and same thing if we hardcast it, so it just doesn't do enough right when it enters, and I wanted to put some better things in. Gnarlwood Dryad is, it's a 1/1 Death Toucher that can become a 3/3 Death Toucher. It's not really anything to write home about. Grim Flayer also can struggle late game. Sure, if you get this early game, can be a really good card, but I'd rather have cards that are good all the time rather than some of the time in here. Ishka is really good. It does have that Delirium ability, but we don't really have a ton of spider synergies in here, and it's not really worth 5 mana for, 4 blockers. It's not really going to do a whole lot else for the deck. Moldgrowth Millipede, like I said before, 7-8 mana, card that's going to be just vanilla for 5 mana is not really worth it. Obsessive Skinner could be good, but we don't really need to buff our commander to get him through. He's already a 2/5 with Death Touch. They can chump block him. We don't care if they do that. We don't care if they have their best card on the battlefield, because they're not going to want to block a Death Toucher with it. So we can get rid of that. I took out Old Stick Fingers as well from the deck. Pretty much, it's not terrible, but you're only milling X cards because the creature cards you don't reveal are put on the bottom of your library and not put to the graveyard. So Old Stick Fingers is only going to be milling 1 card for 3 mana, 2 for 4, 3 for 5, and it's not really a great rate. And then it's not an amazing body either. Scavenging Ooze is great graveyard hate, but we never really want to be getting this with our commander, and it's all right. It is some life gain too, which is nice, but we can do better here. Skola Grove Dancer also is a bit... it is an enchantment creature, which is nice, but whenever a land's put into your graveyard from anywhere you gain 1 life, it doesn't really do a ton besides that. We want cards that can do that can do even more for us. Solemn Simulacrum is a good ramp piece, but again in green, we want to be casting our commander on the 4-drop slot, and Solemn Simulacrum is pretty much only good for commanders that aren't in green and commanders that are higher than 4 mana. And then we took out Death Reap Ritual. It's a delayed card draw. Sure, we can draw maybe 4 cards in a game or 5 cards in a game, depending on how long it goes. You can draw even more, but you're not going to be drawing right when you play this for the most part, and that's really why you take it out. Temple of the False God is a great land to have, a good land to put in the graveyard, but if we have it in our opening hand, it can be really tough to get things going, so I just took it out here. But let's go ahead and add in the cards that I want to add in. First off, we're adding a battle. No battles yet in this deck, which is crazy to me, but we need to have at least one, and you could probably add a few here, but I chose Invasion of Innistrad, which is 2 of anything and 2 black for a battle with flash, and when it enters the battlefield, you give target creature and opponent controls -13/-13 until end of turn, so you're pretty much, it's a removal spell with flash, which is nice. And then on the back, it's an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, create 2/2/2 black zombies. So going a bit with our token theme, which is nice. And then we can pay 3, exile a card from a graveyard. If it was a creature, we make a 2/2 black zombie. So there's the creature hate that we are sort of replacing Scavenging Ooze with. So that's really good there. For creatures, I put in Feign the Broker. It can remove these finality counters from the creatures we get back. Unfortunately, it can only remove it from creatures, so if we get an enchantment or a planeswalker with our commander, not really going to be getting a whole lot. We can't actually remove the counter off of it, but really good to remove those finality counters off our creatures so we can keep re-getting them back, which is really nice. And it can also sack creatures, which is good, and you can sack artifacts, and you can untap him to keep the shenanigans going on. So just a really good card here, I feel like. Mind Rack Harpy, 4 mana for a enchantment creature, 3/2 flyer. Beginning of combat on your turn, each player mills 3 cards. So this is really good for us too, helping us fill that graveyard for our commander, right? We want to have a full graveyard so our commander can really do its thing, and this is a good card that can do it each of our combats, which is nice. Necron Deathmark, an artifact creature from the Warhammer series, 5/3 flash. When it enters, destroy up to 1 target creature, and target player mills 3 cards. So this is better than Carrion Grub, right? Sure, when it enters, we can mill ourselves 3 more cards, so it kind of resets our commander's ability, and then it also gets rid of a creature in the battlefield, so really solid here. Ornithopter of Paradise is a great ramp piece, and it is those 2 creature types as well, so really perfect there. Perennial Behemoth lets us play these lands in the graveyard, and we also don't mind milling it either, because we can either get it back with our commander, or we can unearth it for 2 green, which is also solid. And then Twitching Doll from the set as well, an artifact creature that can get a mana, and then we can't sacrifice it for spider tokens, but honestly, we're most likely just using this for the ramp. For sorceries, we have Breach the Multiverse, which makes everyone mill 10 cards, and then we get a creature from each player's graveyard onto our battlefield, which is great. Buried Alive puts the 3 cards we want the most into our graveyard to search with our commander, which is nice. And then Incarnation Technique, essentially going to be milling us 10 cards, getting 2 creatures in the battlefield, so very strong there. 2 instants, I added Beast Within because the deck didn't come with it, and we want to be able to hit every single kind of permanent in here, and I thought this was really important to add in, so I did that. And then Drag to the Roots from the main set as well. It has Delirium, making it cost 2 less if we have what we need, and then we can destroy non-land permanent, so 2 mana, get rid of any non-land thing is really good there too. And then Artifacts, Key to the City, helps make our commander unblockable and puts cards from our hand into the graveyard, so it can definitely be useful there. And then if we need to, right, after we use it, we can pay 2 mana and draw a card off of it. Wondrous Crucible, a great card to get with our commander to cheat it out. Permanents, we can draw Ward 2. Beginning of our end step, we mill 2 cards, then exile a card at random. Copy it, you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. So sure, it is exiling things, but we're always filling our graveyard more than we're exiling, and we get free spells off of this, so definitely really solid there. And then last but not least, we are adding Lignify, which is sort of a halfway removal spell, making a creature a tree folk with base power and toughness 0/4 and lose all abilities. But what's great here is it's a tribal or a kindred enchantment, right? So it's going to be 2 card types in our graveyard. But yeah, that's the cards I'm going to be adding into this deck. Let me know what you would take out. Let me know what you're going to put in. I also think the alternate commander of this deck, Renma, is going to be super spicy, so if you want to build one of those decks or you want to see me one, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to make that comment in this video, as well as the other Duskmourn Precon upgrade videos we have on the channel, and the last one that's going to be coming out soon, for a chance to win a free Duskmourn Precon anywhere in the US. 2 weeks after that last video is uploaded, we're going to be revealing the winner live on our Twitch stream, twitch.tv/chaoticcommandermtg. So make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you can be notified when that last video goes live. But otherwise, I'll see you then. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.